Welcome to the Political Matrix News. Politics, people, local, regional, national news. Political Matrix News keeps you informed. We have the sources, we have the truth from inside the Political Matrix.
Welcome to this edition of Political Matrix News. I'm Mike Bates. Joining us on today's Political Matrix, Greg Fink, Scott Miller, and Tiffany Houston. This segment, we're going to talk about Florida election security. Are dead people being removed from the voter rolls? What about other people who are ineligible to vote? What kind of security precautions does Florida have in place to prevent voter fraud? Greg, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm living here in Alachua County now. I've only been here like a year. And being a bored political junkie like I am, I started looking at the voter rolls because there's been all this discussion about dead people voting and prisoners voting and felons voting and all that type of stuff. And the paperwork they have here in the elections office, and maybe it's the same in county statewide, I have no idea. But the paperwork they have here has basically a sheet that has how many people that were dead that got removed, how many felons that didn't get their rights restored that were removed, and then it has a tally at the bottom of it. Then there's another sheet saying how many addresses were taken off as inactive voters so they can clean up the address database. And that sheet says 0. And so basically, but it only says 0 every 2 years. Then on the third year, it comes up with a very large amount of numbers, basically that accumulates the numbers of all the dead and felons for the previous 2 years. And so I don't know if it's just interesting paperwork or if there's very contradictory paperwork, or this is something that they're figuring out how to go ahead and get people to look like they're being eligible to vote. Because if you remove them from the rolls is one thing, but if their addresses are still on the absentee list to get the mail, then were they really removed? And so we asked that question, and we still haven't got an answer yet. We're still waiting for an answer. But I mean, if you remove somebody from the voter database, their address should also be removed. You know, in theory. I mean, if they're not living there, they're the only ones living there, then their address should be taken off the mailing list, and it's not. And so, also, it's a real interesting way how they classify them as inactive voters or active voters. And so there's no real defining classification of inactive voters, because usually if people are dead or they're sick or they're dying or they're in jail or they're felons, they're most likely inactive voters, depending on how long they've been sick or dying or whatever. So that's the whole thing. And basically, we've had 0 inactive voters in this one county removed, but we've had a lot of dead people and felons possibly removed. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's a lot of contradictory paperwork there.
Well, keep in mind, though, Greg, a few years ago, the voters of Florida very foolishly approved Amendment 4, which allowed felons to vote in Florida.
Right.
Once they have completed their sentences and paid all their fines and made restitution.
Right.
That's not the way it ended up being implemented.
Yeah, they have a line item for that as well. They have a line item for felons that have gotten their rights restored and the ones who have not. And so they do separate it like that. But if no inactive voters, I mean, I have a hunch that most felons are not active voters. Maybe they are. Maybe they're really good 4-star, 5-star voters, as we call them in the consultant industry. But I don't think they are. And the fact that they have not been removed is interesting.
Well, one of the nice things about, being in the elections business is we have the ability to get lists from these supervisors of elections. And it just occurs to me that, that maybe what we need to do is start a protocol, or maybe even an organization, because voter integrity is an American issue. It's not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue, because regardless of where you are, you can be in a place with a majority in the opposition party. So you could be in the minority party, and if if the elections are rigged to begin with, even if you find somebody that that can cross that threshold, then when they're gone, they're gone. What you're going to lose your vote. Your vote will basically mean nothing. So election integrity for me is a very important thing. And I think that being able to get and archive these lists so that when these supervisors of elections tell us that they have removed 22,000 people from their list, we have the ability to compare this year's list versus last year's list versus the new additions.
Right.
And those three things ought to add up to a number that we can reproduce. And if it doesn't, then we do something. Then we report it.
It should not take the rocket Gibraltar to go ahead and have to move it to get that information. I mean, it's real simple. I mean, it's like, you have a regular CRM tool, and you have customers and you have inactive customers, and then just put it in a different bucket. And it's very simple to do. I mean, they should have a timestamp of when they died, the timestamp of when they last voted, and timestamp of when they were removed. I mean, in Florida, you're supposed to be removed 7 days after you pass away. And so that's the way it is in Florida. But I think it's very interesting that they do not have, the paperwork is very contradictory. If you have all these people who were really removed as one paperwork, then you have 0 inactive voters removed and 0 addresses removed for the whole year, 2 years in a row. But then the third year, they accumulate the numbers of the previous 2 years.
And do you think, Greg, that is a statewide issue, or do you think this is only because Alachua County is dark blue?
I know Alachua County has had some issues. They, I guess before I moved here, that she was actually going down to the jail to help them. They had people in the jail help mail out ballots.
While incarcerated. Well, I mean,
yes, while incarcerated.
Okay, but if they're awaiting trial, they're eligible to vote. And if they're in jail, you're typically in jail for misdemeanors and prison for felonies. So
these people
are eligible to vote.
Yeah,
the ones in jail.
Yeah, I mean, the ones in jail, if they want to help out with the election process, go for them. But I've been around a lot of jails, and there's a lot of jails all throughout the country. I don't know too many people who are hanging around the jail that are in the right mindset to help out with any type of election integrity.
Well, for me, the concern isn't so much that that felons will vote, because I mean, people that are daily engaged in politics, are just a very small minority of people. So and
or some house gets 20 absentee ballots.
People in jail have are less inclined than people who are every day showing up who are not in jail. I mean, for lack of a better way to say it. But the concern is that you have all these open accounts that people can request a absentee ballot and vote using that ballot, and people don't. If they're not voters, if they're just registered because someone came to their house and got them fired up to vote, then now all of a sudden they have a free voucher that they can hand in, that less scrupulous people can hand in for whatever candidate they want, and don't think that it's paranoia. Democrat and Republican, over the last 25 years, I have seen votes at the end of the cycle. One candidate's winning, and then next thing you know, this last bin gets opened, and suddenly, oh my gosh,
exactly,
it's a landslide for the other way because it was his home district or something like that.
You and I have both been involved in at least 2 elections that were separated by 30 votes or less.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been involved in one election that was separated by 5 votes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the thing is, every vote does count, and votes do go missing. And I mean, there's what was it, like 10 years ago in Santa Rosa County, they had 5,000 ballots in somebody's trunk of a car, and they found ballots. I mean, but they never talked about what they did with the ballots. They didn't say, did they sway the election this way or that way? They found the ballots. They're illegal ballots. They're weird. It's bizarre. But nobody ever talked about what happened afterwards. I mean, there's no
swept under the rug.
So it just thin air. No big deal. No harm, no foul. And
All
so
right,
the
well, that's
election
all the
was still
time we've
good.
got for this topic on today's edition of the Political Matrix News. So we're going to conclude. Join us for another topic on Political Matrix News.